Hello, a very warm good morning to all of you and welcome to Unacademy. Welcome to today's The Hindu newspaper analysis, where we take a look at today's The Hindu newspaper and analyze the important articles relevant for your examination, be it for the prelims or be it for the mains. In the meanwhile, we shall also be taking a look at the type of questions which can be framed from those type of articles that we are going to discuss and thereby help you understand how to go about with the answer writing. Now, before we take a look into the topics of the day and the topics that we are going to have a discussion for, an announcement for all of you preparing for the mains examination, and this is about the August optional carnival. So, we at Unacademy bring for you a plethora of different optional subjects for you to study, to choose from the top educators of the country so that you can hone your skills for the mains examination. Optional forms a very important area where the good marks or the good score in optional ends up determining whether you are in the race for a merit list or whether you end up preparing once again. For the first time on Unacademy, history and geography have been brought about in complete English medium platform. Do avail the opportunity, use the code and thereby enable your efficient journey. Now, let us take a look at the topics that we are going to have a discussion for. So, today in total we are going to have a discussion for 7 different topics. So, first of all, the road to 2047 for Indian agriculture. This has appeared in the editorial section and all these topics are from the international edition of today's The Hindu newspaper. So, road to 2047 for Indian agriculture. This is relevant for your GS paper 3. Then, not taking sides. This is a series of various different articles which capture the Indian Prime Minister's visit to Ukraine and talk about the developments thereby. So, this is an article which has appeared in page 1 of the newspaper as well, page 3 of the newspaper as well as the editorial section. So, that is what we are going to analyze, not taking sides. This is GS paper 2, but it is more of a developing story. You will come across much more of the details in the coming days. Singapore eyes deserts and forests for renewables. Singapore is facing an energy crisis of sorts where it doesn't have any new methods or measures to generate more amount of renewable energy in order to meet the climate goals. So, this is relevant again for GS paper 3. Then, space sector contributed rupees 20,000 crore to India's GDP in the past decade, having a significant multiplier effect to Indian economy and job creation. Bangladeshi unrest has hit the engineering exports to the region, steel exports, etc. That is something we are going to take a look into. Pacific leaders discuss about the rising seas and the global conflict in the Pacific Islands Forum, and Information and Broadcasting Ministry to support finalists of the global contest, that is WAVES. So, we are going to take a look into these particular articles, starting with the first article of the day, and that is Road to 2047 for Indian agriculture. Now, here, this entire article talks about the fact that when India has set its goal for 2047, that by 2047 we are going to be the developed nation and we are going to be amongst those developed nations of the world with a high per capita income for all the citizens. At the same time, one has to understand agricultural sector also requires to grow at a significantly faster rate in order to help achieve that dream. Because overall in Indian agricultural sector, we have a situation where around almost 43% of the population is involved in the agricultural sector. And if India wants to become a developed nation, these 43% of the population, they need to grow. Their per capita income needs to grow, and for that, agriculture overall also needs to grow. Now, the problem with that is that even though this 43% is involved directly or indirectly into agriculture, they end up contributing only around 18% to the GDP. So, there is significant amount of gap in between what is the contribution and what is the proportion involved. There is a kind of an economic imbalance. Indian agriculture for the past few decades now has been growing at a very meager pace of around 2 to 3%, with many states indicating the growth of even around 1%. And that is not good, be it if you consider it for the food security of the country, if you consider it for the farm income and the farmer's income. For none of these parameters, it is good. So when we talk about this particular article, this article does mention about certain challenges faced by Indian agriculture and does talk about the government schemes which are in place. So we are going to take a nutshell out of it. We are going to discuss the very crux of the challenges faced by the agricultural sector, which are the government schemes which have been put in place, what are the lacunae with that, and then what can be the way forward. Starting with the challenges faced by the Indian agricultural setup. Now, when we talk about the challenges, there are many challenges. Starting with the basic challenge of the Indian agricultural setup is the size of the farmland. Now, the size of the farmland in majority of the cases is very, very small. As per the various different economic surveys, in India, close to around 86% of the farmers, 86% of farmers, they are either small or marginal. That means the size of the farmland is very, very small, to the tune of less than 2 hectares. So that is a large chunk, huge amount of farming community having a very small land area. Now, what is the problem with the small land area? The problem is that you cannot grow multiple crops at the same time in that farmland. Another problem is, for example, you cannot deploy agricultural machinery because your farmland is so very small. And then also after that, once you generate the crop, let's suppose, you will be generating the crops in such little amount of volume or weight, you won't have any bargaining power in the market. So whatever the market decides, you end up swaying along with that. And that is where the farmers face a lot of issues. Then you don't have a backup income as well, that is income diversification. When you have majority of the farmers who are small and marginal, obviously not many of them will be able to afford livestock, poultry, etc. So their sources of income are extremely limited to crop cultivation. And whenever there is any calamity of nature, we have seen the impact of climate change is upon us. Rainfall, which earlier used to be distributed in a uniform pattern, now is concentrated. Rather than having rains every frequent number of days, you have concentrated rains in one or couple of days followed by a dry heat wave. Both of these conditions can be disastrous for the crop cultivation. So the larger farmers, they are still able to get away with it. But when it comes to the small scale farmers, the marginal farmers, they get impacted quite significantly. So that is first of the major problem, that is the size of the land holding. So other than that, you can have the economic imbalance. Economic imbalance, again, in the case of inequality of the size of the land, you can consider, or even the contribution that the farming sector makes to the GDP. So that in itself tells you that overall the farming sector is not contributing uniformly. All the farmers are not contributing uniformly. Now, there is also the issue of land degradation. Ever since the advent of Green Revolution, there have been certain changes in Indian agricultural sector. For example, now you have over-reliance on growing wheat and rice. So there has been a significant or substantial lack of crop diversification. So when you keep on growing the same crops over and over again, not only does the soil become infertile, but at the same time, you have to support those crops by increased application of fertilizers, chemicals, pesticides that you have to apply in larger amounts. So that again leads to soil and land degradation, eventually leading to a situation where the soil is not able to support any natural vegetation, risking even desertification. So this is a problem which has reduced the productivity yield per hectare in the regions of Punjab, Haryana and Western Uttar Pradesh, the regions where the Green Revolution actually started. So here, this land degradation has been because of lack of crop diversification, or simply you can put this as the rice wheat cycle. UPSC has been asking this question about the rice wheat cycle and the impact of it in the mains examination for the past decade now. So you can expect a question associated with that. Now, and another one along with that, excessive application of fertilizers. Okay. Now, due to this, the yield per hectare has reduced, the productivity of the farmland. The same farm which, let's suppose, earlier used to produce 100 kgs, now is producing much lesser. So, due to that, the income level of the farmers, or the output income of the farmers, that has started to go down. Then the impact of climate change is in front of all of us. You have sudden unseasonal rains and then followed by a very long dry condition, due to which, and then these heat waves oftentimes also end up reducing the productivity and overall harvest. For the past couple of years, India has seen its wheat production being impacted by heat waves, rice cultivation last year getting impacted due to huge amount of rains, excess rains in the month of July, due to which we had reduced productivity. Then this year again, you had the impact of these heat waves. So, for the last 2 to 3 years, India has been experiencing extremity of events. As per the IPCC, in the last couple of decades, India is amongst one of those few countries which have experienced the brunt of climate extremities. So, that is where climate change has got a major impact. Then market access. Now, not all the farmers have an equal market access. What do we mean by market access? Let's suppose I am growing a crop of wheat, rice, sugarcane, maize, anything. Now, if I am an individual in any particular state, now I should have the ability to sell my product anywhere else in the country. But that is not the case. Generally, you have the norms where only the local market is accessible. You have government initiatives which were brought about, for example, ENAM, for the market integration across the country, but those did not have significant amount of yield or a significant amount of result till now. You have around 1300 mandis which have been integrated, but unless and until you carry out the agricultural reforms at the state level or at the central level, this market access is important, because if this market access is not there, then as a consequence, you don't have the real price discovery. That means that let's suppose I am selling onions, I am growing onions. Now, if I know that the demand of onions is much greater in, let's suppose, Delhi, and I am an onion producer or a farmer from Maharashtra, I should have the right to go for selling my onions in Delhi, right? So that basically that can bring me a greater amount of income. So that lack of market access is a major hindrance, and that needs to be sorted out by reforms. Then infrastructure. Infrastructure is still one of the bottlenecks in Indian agriculture. For example, when we talk about the connectivity, farm to market connectivity, now that has also got to be developed. That is where schemes like Pradhan Mantri Gram Sadak Yojana needs to have a greater implementation and a faster implementation. But infrastructure is not only restricted to the roads. Infrastructure here also refers to the presence of storage structures for storing of the harvest, the cold storages, etc. The presence of irrigation facilities. In India, still around half of the farmlands, they don't have the irrigational facilities. So this is significantly impacting the growth opportunities and, in fact, productivity opportunities. On the face of climate change, where you have such a great variation whether rainfall will occur or not and the conditions of the heat waves, imagine if a simple irrigational method is provided in a particular area, then the farmers will be able to protect their crops and have that productivity. That automatically will bring the prosperity in the long run. So that is where infrastructure development has to be three-pronged. One is the hard infrastructure in the form of, let's suppose, roads, railways for the transportation of the goods, the farm products. Then you have the infrastructure in the form of the storage structures, infrastructure in the form of, let's suppose, irrigational methods, then infrastructure in the form of electricity supply. All this should be reliable and affordable. Now, these are few of the challenges that we have mentioned, but the challenges are many more. Think about what other challenges are faced by the farmers today and drop a comment in the comment section. Let us see how many different challenges can you come up with. But then after this, we come to the initiatives taken by the government, which has been highlighted in this article as well. Now, the government has been taking a slew of various different measures and initiatives in order to improve the farm sector. Having said that, there has been certain limitations and there have been certain foundations. So, for example, the Pradhan Mantri Krishi Sinchai Yojana. This is in order to improve the irrigational supply and irrigational water availability in various different farmlands of the country. Now, this has brought prosperity, not prosperity per se, but this has brought the availability of water to thousands of farmers. But then this pace needs to be quickened much faster. Why? Because again, the impact of climate change is already upon us. Every season we are experiencing crop losses. So that is where, now take the case of the neighboring country like China. China is not facing that brunt of climate change. This year China had a record wheat harvest, right, because the conditions were adequate. Whereas in India, we were suffering from heat waves at the time of the harvest, impacting the wheat harvest. So that is where, when it is happening with us, when it is impacting us, high time that we have to fasten this Krishi Sinchai Yojana. Now, this is where the state governments also need to provide a better watershed management system where they are able to have the water storage, rainwater harvesting, tank construction, etc., in order to ensure that irrigational water is provided. Then, Pradhan Mantri Fasal Bima Yojana. This is the crop insurance scheme, and on the face of it, it is the largest crop insurance scheme anywhere across the world, providing the insurance to the farmers against the aspect of post-harvest losses and so on. But here also there lies a problem. Now, Down to Earth had carried out a detailed study about the aspect of Fasal Bima Yojana, and it was found out that many of the cases, when the insurers, for example, as a farmer, I have taken the insurance from a particular organization, right? Let's suppose I have taken the insurance from an organization ABC. Now, what these organizations are doing, what these insurance companies are doing, basically, when they detect that this year the weather is going to be bad, or this year there is going to be heat wave. Now, in that case, they stop accepting the premium from the farmers so that they don't have to pay out the insurance amount. Now, the poor farmers at that point of time, when they are denied the premium or nobody is taking the premium for them, they are unable to look at these larger plans by the insurance companies. And such cases have been found to be present in Haryana. Such cases have been found to be present in the region of Tamil Nadu, in the region of Karnataka, in the region of Maharashtra. Many of these cases have been taken to the judiciary and the cases are pending before the court. But that tells you the lacunae in the Fasal Bima Yojana. Now, when we talk about the Fasal Bima Yojana, here the climatic conditions need to be catered as well. That what conditions of temperature would lead to the destruction of crop? What condition of rainfall would lead to the destruction of crop? What natural conditions can otherwise lead to the detriment of the farmland? So, that delineation and clear-cut depiction needs to be brought about so that the weather-based or climate change-based crop insurance is provided, and more awareness needs to be provided to the farming community as well to avail this insurance scheme. And stringent action needs to be taken against those insurance companies who are denying the availability or denying the disbursement of the funds. So they keep on taking out large amount of premium from the farmers in the conditions where they see that there won't be any insurance claims. So like that, many of these insurance companies, they have earned significant amount. But when it comes to the disbursement, they say this year we have not taken any amount of premium. So that is a problem. Pradhan Mantri Kisan Samman Nidhi. Now this is a scheme which has been working wonderfully well for the farmers. This is a scheme for providing what is also the PM Kisan, for providing money directly into the hands of the farmers so that they can go for crop diversification, better feed, and they can have some amount of support for the growing of the crops. However, here also the amount of monetary disbursement needs to keep track and needs to be coupled with the inflation as well, because this has been fixed quite significantly for some time now, and inflation has been increasing. So as a consequence, that money is not turning out to be sufficient. So that has to be adjusted with inflation. That is something which can be done going ahead. Now, International Year of Millets in 2023 was a government initiative which was celebrated, and that raised awareness of the larger public about the aspect of millets and why these millets are important. Now, these millets, they are climate resilient crops. They can grow in any kind of conditions. So that is where they don't require that much of irrigation also. They don't require that much fertile soil also. So that is why when we talk about these millets, they need to be promoted much more, and that is where International Year of Millets went significantly ahead in that. Then Agriculture Infra Fund has been allocated, providing thousands of jobs as well, as the article mentions. Now this infra fund has to be utilized to construct more cold storage structures, has to be utilized to provide local irrigational methods. Other than that, the government has also come up with the soil health card scheme. Now this soil health card scheme, while it has been distributed, this soil health card has been distributed to many thousands of the farmers, but this needs to be much more prevalent. This ensures that over application of fertilizers, etc., does not happen in the farmland, and the farmer caters to only those kind of nutrients which the soil in that region does not have. So a reliance or overall reliability of the soil health card, improved execution, disbursement and regular updation is going to go a long way in improving our agricultural setup. Now, another problem that the farmers face is basically the lack of credit. That is, they are not given the availability of loans at the rate, at a cheaper rate, or in many of the cases the banks deny them loans because the banks feel that this is going to be a kind of a risk loan, where it is going to be a loan which will never come back. So it can turn out into an NPA, so why give them money? So for that, the problem is why they don't get these loans easily is that majority of the farmers, they don't have the land records which is mentioned in the government setup and the government record. So for that, the Swamitva scheme has come a long way, where digitization of land records of the farmers are being done in a larger scale, which will improve the amount of loan disbursement, credit availability and also veracity of information with regards to who has got land where, so that eventual land reform also, if required, can be carried out reliably. So these are some of the government schemes which are running parallelly in order to improve the cultivation or agricultural sector. But there are certain measures which can be adopted going ahead in order to provide the improvement of Indian agriculture. And we need to be aware of the challenges of Indian agriculture, the way forward of the Indian agriculture and the government schemes, because you can have questions from either one of them or a larger question combining all three of them. and UPSC has been asking this every year almost in the main. So, it would be better for us to have an analysis. So, first of all, what is the way forward? Improved infrastructure, and again all the different prongs of infrastructure that we have talked about. Then, improved weather forecast. Now, this is a problem. Now, climate change is upon us. Now, the best or the least that we can do to fight climate change is provide the farmers with a timely idea or intervention with regards to when the rainfall is going to come. For example, take the case of this year. Now, this is a well recorded case. Now, in this year, in the region of northern Karnataka, for example, you had the occurrence of some amount of rains in late April and early part of May. Now, that is where the weather forecast that they had access to, that told them that it is going to rain from now on regularly. So, that is where the farmers, they started the sowing practices. Before time, they started sowing the crops and they sown all the crops in that area. But then after that, there has been a complete lack of rain and almost drought-like conditions in the region of northern Karnataka. So, large amount of farmers, cotton farmers, etc., they have been experiencing crisis after crisis due to the failure of correct weather forecast. Now, this weather forecast, which is done at a larger level, needs to be done at the taluka level, at the block level, and information needs to be disseminated up till the level of the gram panchayats. Let us have that system where India sets a benchmark for the world. Why should we follow the systems across the world? Why should we not strive to aim to set those benchmarks where at each of the village level that weather forecast is provided with an update, so that the farmers have an idea about what to expect. Then they can maybe arrange or delay the cropping season, or they can arrange for some other alternative, at least provide that facility to the farmers. So, improved weather forecast by application of more Doppler radars, that can be done. Then improved research and development for climate resilient crops, for growing crops in the verge of drought resistance, etc. Better seeds, better amount of nutritional status to improve the yield per hectare, more research and development needs to be carried out. Improved market access, a national truly integrated market needs to come in. Crop diversification needs to happen. There needs to be diversification of crops from wheat and rice into the crops or horticultural crops like vegetables, as well as there needs to be income diversification. Even the Ashok Dalwai Committee for Indian Agriculture, which was set up in order to the purpose of the committee, this committee was set up in 2015, and the purpose of the committee was to find out measures to improve or double the farmers' income. Now, this Ashok Dalwai Committee in its recommendation had said that lack of crop diversification and lack of income diversification are the two major reasons why the income level of the farmers is stagnant and decreasing. So, crop diversification, you grow various different crops. Income diversification is what? That is, let us suppose you go for poultry farming along with that, rear livestock, or go for aquaculture or pisciculture along with the crop cultivation, so that is a fallback option to give you some amount of income. Now, in our case of agricultural production, value addition is minimal. Now, this value addition, when it is done to the crops, that is when the income level will improve. So, that value addition needs to be done, be it maize, be it wheat, be it rice, be it sugarcane, and only when that value addition is done will you have also the diversification of the type of jobs that agricultural sector creates. Many industries, agro-based industries, have the opportunity to come up in this sector. Then, easy availability of credit, so that the farmers, they don't get trapped into the clutches of the money lenders, and sharing of best practices across the country. Many of the farmers, even in drier regions, are harvesting better produce and different types of produce earning good amount by adopting natural practices of permaculture and natural organic farming. So there are certain seminars, etc., which are done, but then there needs to be a campaign at the local level by each of the state governments to instill that idea of best practices to the local farmers, give them the required amount of information. It is that lack of information from all different sides where the farmer finds himself or herself alone to fight the battle against the climate, battle against the hardship. So these are some of the way forward which can be provided to improve the cultivation. Okay. So in this article, what we have seen, we have taken a look at it in significant amount of detail because that is very important for your examination. So here, what is it that we have seen? The issues in cultivation, the government schemes which are provided in order to improve the agricultural setup, and then eventually what is the way forward for India to attain agricultural growth to such an extent that 2047 agriculture becomes one of the key components driving India's growth. Now, the practice question. Discuss the challenges faced by the Indian agricultural sector and mention some measures which can be implemented to improve the situation. Now here, in the introduction, what do you write? Here, understand what is the main subject of the question. The subject of the question is Indian agricultural sector. Challenges is not the main subject. So in the introduction, talk about that India has been significantly, or Indian agriculture is one of those sectors of the economy supporting 43% of the population, directly or indirectly contributing close to around 18% to the GDP. India has been agrarian in its economic setup over a period of many millennia, but now that share of agriculture in the economy is going down. Now that will set the context for the body. In the body, because there you have said in the last line of introduction that the share of agriculture is going down. So that automatically indicates it is going down because of certain issues. So then start in the body with the aspect about the issues which are faced. So the Indian agricultural sector is going through multiple challenges and multiple headwinds which need to be taken care of. Some of them are, and list some of these, right? And don't just mention one word or a couple of words. After you mention these words, for example, low productivity, that is the low yield per hectare, or land degradation, then after that write a couple of sentences. Lack of infrastructure, which infrastructure are you talking about? So have that format of point and sub paragraph mentioned. Then after that you can come up with the way forward and then mention these way forward. Now at the end of it, while the government has also brought about various different initiatives like the Pradhan Mantri Fasal Bima Yojana, Krishi Sinchai Yojana, PM Kisan, but at the same time, the execution and implementation needs to be carried out with a greater extent at the level of the local community, and for that the central, the state and the local governments need to work in unison. That will be your end of the body, and then in the conclusion, India can never dream to be a developed country without a developed and a productive agricultural sector. The need of the hour is to look into and bolster this sector in order to provide a better means of livelihood and make agriculture a lucrative sector to be in. Like that, you can end the answer in a positive note and secure good marks. Okay? Try writing it on your own and try different type of presentation styles along with that. Now coming to the next article. Now this has appeared in the page 1, not neutral, India on the side of peace, PM in Kiev. Now Prime Minister's visit to Ukraine has happened, where there have been a global media reportage which has been happening about the Prime Minister's visit to Ukraine, about the aspects of this visit. Now, while the Prime Minister has been visiting Ukraine, now, first of all, one has to understand the backdrop of it. When the Prime Minister's visit to Russia happened recently, at that point of time, you had the meeting of NATO members for Ukraine. Now, Ukraine for a long period of time has been calling for India to take a decisive stance with regards to Russia, so that basically Ukraine wants to isolate Russia. Now, India has maintained that we have very close ties to Russia. And while the entire world still sees it as a follow-up of the non-aligned policy that India always maintained since the 50s and the 60s, the Indian Prime Minister and the Indian administration has made it very clear this time that, see, we are not the case where we are neutral. We are away from various different countries. We like to maintain close contact and close relationship with each countries. Having said that, at the time when the Indian Prime Minister was visiting Russia or Moscow, at that point of time, during that point of time, Russian bombers bombarded a hospital in Ukraine, which led to significant casualties. That is where you had Vladimir Zelensky basically talking about the aspect of how India in a way is fueling the war, and he was disappointed with the Indian stance. So that is where the Prime Minister's visit, which is the first visit by an Indian Prime Minister ever since Ukraine gained independence, since that point of time, that marks a significant milestone. This also provides with the opportunity where India is seeking to balance out its ties with the Western world as well, and at the same time, we have to understand that Ukraine is important for us. Why is Ukraine important for India? First of all, Ukraine has been supporting a large amount of Indian diaspora, particularly the students. So even after the war ends, you need the Indian students will go back. So you need a perfect atmosphere for the Indian students there. So the diaspora or people are at the forefront. Secondly, this basically makes the Prime Minister one of the few heads of states, including the heads of state from Indonesia, Turkey, as well as Hungary. These are the heads of state who have visited both Moscow as well as Ukraine or Kiev. So that provides or makes India in a unique position where India can be a negotiator for peace. And as a leader of the countries of the global south, the world is looking up to India to provide that kind of fillip for negotiations. So that is another advantage. So when we talk about this, one is the aspect of peace negotiations, where the External Affairs Minister reiterated yesterday that India has expressed its willingness to be open on all fronts when it comes to the peace negotiations, etc. Then the other aspect is the diaspora. And in that, you can include the cultural ties, cultural and historical ties. Then other than that, you see, at a more tangible level, India's defense is significantly dependent on Ukraine. When it comes to frigates and when it comes to even the warships, the engines for the warships and many of the defense equipments that is provided by the defense industry in Ukraine. Now, the ongoing Russia-Ukraine war has meant that there has been a delay in not only the engine upgrade for many of the Indian warships, but the frigate delivery has also suffered. Now, at a time when the Indian Ocean is being dominated by the Chinese Navy, that is a risk that India cannot afford. So here, defense ties. Now, where India went silent was basically Ukraine's request to provide medical assistance, medical facilities and buildings and so on. That is where India has not been very proactive. But that is also an area where collaboration and cooperation can be carried out. So, in the midst of all this, Volodymyr Zelensky, that is the Ukrainian head of state, also made a statement in front of the media that if India wants, it can end the war. And that is a very strong statement. Now, what did he say or why did he mean that? So basically, he said that if India chooses to isolate Russia, if India openly starts to criticize Russia, it can basically isolate Russia, because as per Zelensky, India is funding the war by providing the Russian economy with the billions of dollars by purchasing the Russian oil and Russian defense items. But that is something that India is never going to exercise as an option. Even if, let's suppose, India basically exercises that option, that will put the world in a much more riskier place, where Russia will eventually be pushed into a corner with China. And that is the nexus that India doesn't want to let it develop to such an extent. So that is where international global geopolitics does not basically will allow India and its interests to be hampered by openly criticizing Russian community there. So that is where this is not about taking sides, and this article talks about the fact that it is to balance the narrative, it is to maintain good relations, maintain the relations with the European community as well, because European community has been taking a look at India's stance in a very negative manner. So this visit will help significantly and will end up providing the pathway to bring about peace. The Prime Minister also made it clear, and very articulately so, that we are not on either of the sides, we are always on the side of the peace. So wherever peace prevails, we are on that side, which tells you India's stance throughout the war. Okay? Now, then moving on into the third article. The third article talks about energy-hungry Singapore eyes deserts and forest for renewables. Now you see, Singapore is a small island nation. It is almost a kind of a glorified city nation, if you can think about it. Now the space that Singapore has is not significant. Now Singapore has got a significantly high amount of population density without much space to expand. So while it has done remarkably well in order to handle its urban locale and urban environment, but at the same time, when you talk about Singapore, you have to understand that they also have a limitation. What is the limitation? Now, their energy requirement and the energy demand is going to increase in the coming years, as it is. The demand is increasing. Every year, more and more data centers are being located and centered around Singapore. These data centers alone, they account for almost 7% of the total energy of Singapore. So that means the energy security will be at risk going ahead into the future. Any other country, what they can do, or any country, even Singapore, what they can do, they can install more power plants, they can generate more electricity and fulfill the requirements. But there comes a problem. Singapore basically, as per its agreements and as per its commitments, it aims to achieve net zero status by 2050. Net zero status by 2050. So, and the aim is that the emissions would peak by around 2030, and after that net zero would be achieved by 2050. So, for that what does it need? It needs renewables. So, which renewables? For example, solar, for example, wind. Now, these are some of the renewables. Now, you have to understand the problem which Singapore faces. Now, when it comes to solar power plants, now these solar power plants require a large space to be installed. Singapore doesn't have space. How many floating solar power plants can it power? Eventually, that also has got its restrictions. Why? Because Singapore lies at the heart of one of the busiest sea routes across the world, across the entire Johor Strait, in that region leading to the Malacca Strait. That is very, very busy sea route. At any point of time, from anywhere in Singapore, if you take a look at the skyline, always it will be dotted with ships lined up for and waiting for their turn. So they cannot end up occupying the sea in its entirety. So there is a limitation for solar power. Now Singapore is an equatorial country. Equatorial country means that there is the presence of the ITCZ or the doldrums. So that means the wind is also not quite that strong throughout the year. You have seasons of stronger winds, but you have many seasons of absolutely calm, humid conditions with rainfall every afternoon. So the climatological aspect also does not allow exploitation by wind power to that extent. So that is where Singapore basically has been taking a look at or exploring the options for signing agreements with countries like Malaysia, Thailand, Australia and so on in order to import renewable energy from them. For example, it is seeking to come across an agreement with Australia where Australia will set up large power plants, solar power plants, and through the undersea cable transport or basically export all this surplus renewable power to Singapore to fulfill its requirements. In that way, Singapore can attain a kind of neutrality, carbon neutrality can be attained. Otherwise, what Singapore stands at the risk of is basically a kind of disturbed or energy scarcity. Now, in the case of energy scarcity, all the companies and the data centers immediately will relocate. That will impact Singapore's economy as well. But the problem with this transportation or import of electricity from this far away distance is significant. The problem is that there will be significant amount of loss, attenuation and transportation loss. So there, these losses would mean that energy that is required will still not be available. So this is the problem that is faced by the country. And this is the problem faced by many of the smaller countries who want to achieve that net zero. But in the era of increasing population and increasing energy requirement, they don't have any other avenue to produce that electricity. So when we comprehend the challenges faced by Singapore, growing energy need driven by the industries and growing population, lack of many renewable options in the region of Singapore owing to its location, then transmission losses when it comes to import. When energy is considered, there will be huge amount of losses. So it will be very costly endeavor. Then there will be a loss of strategic autonomy. What do we mean by that? So basically, when we talk about the present situation, Singapore generates majority of its energy from fossil fuels. Now, fossil fuels basically mean that you have an autonomy, that if today I have got good relations with XYZ country, let's suppose I have got good relations in Middle East, I have got good relations, let's suppose in Latin America, I can get the oil, I can get those fossil fuels from there. But tomorrow, I will have the option to diversify these fossil fuel imports from, let's suppose, Russia or other countries as well. So that provides me as a country a strategic autonomy where I can not only explore the best price, I can explore the long-term contracts as well. So that strategic autonomy is very important for countries like India, countries like Singapore, where majority of its energy is imported. In our case also, we import majority of the crude oil, right? Singapore imports majority of all the fossil fuels. So that is where there can be an autonomy. But when it comes to imports from, let's suppose, countries like Australia, Malaysia, Thailand, now undersea cables are providing you with that energy, then you don't have the option to choose. You have arrived at an agreement with these three countries, so you have to be dependent on the energy provided by these three countries itself. You cannot have the option thereby that, okay, I will choose from, or tomorrow my relations with Australia are not good, I will take energy from Indonesia. No, that is not the option. So it limits your options available. Oftentimes it can lead to market monopoly practices and heavy amount of price involved. So what is the way forward in this? Various different countries are facing from this problem. So one can think about a kind of an energy grid network where when we talk about tropical countries such as India and African countries. Now, these countries can take the initiative to produce that surplus amount of solar power or wind power, and that can be provided to a network of grid. And various different countries can, smaller nations who don't have that much ability to deploy them, they can basically tap in and tap out of those grids. So, this can be one of the way forward, that is global grid structures. Now, this will also provide significant amount of earning opportunity to the poorer nations across the tropical regions, where the availability of sunlight, availability of winds are present, but other resources are not there. So, they can earn by exporting energy. So, this can be one of them. Then you can have the aspect of increased amount of tidal energy. Tidal energy, particularly in the channelized strait like regions around Singapore, that can be further exaggerated. And then you also have the temperature difference based energy that is also generated from the sea. Floating solar power plants can be deployed upon ships. Rooftop solar as a practice can be involved. So, all these various mechanisms have to be implemented by these countries in order to ensure that there is better adherence to emission norms and increased amount of transfer into the kind of renewable energy platforms. Okay? Now, here the way forward, I hope we can encapsulate. So, what are the way forward? Rooftop solar. Rooftop solar is one of those. Then tidal energy. Then after that, even global grids. Then after that, floating solar plants. Then you can also have green hydrogen as one of those avenues for energy generation. Hydrogen can produce significant amount of energy. So, that can be utilized. Okay? Now, here the question. In an era of renewables, discuss the challenges faced by smaller countries to meet the climate targets. Here, understand, way forward is not asked, it is a 10-marker question. So, just talk about the problems faced. So, in the introduction, here you have to talk about the climate targets and the renewables. So, here as the world or as the aspect or impact of climate change is upon us, we need to take an action in unison to fight against climate change. While larger countries have the capacity to do so, it is the smaller countries which often fall behind in the race due to some aspect or the other. Now, after that in the body, talk about these challenges, talk about the strategic autonomy, talk about the lack of space, talk about the lack of available options, the geographical limitations that they have, take the example of Singapore and then mention all the various issues that it faces, and eventually you have to say in the concluding part that if the world has to achieve its climate targets, for that each and every country has to achieve those targets as well. Okay? And there the world needs to come together and you can provide a kind of a way forward as well. Now, coming to some of the other articles relevant for a brief discussion. Space sector contributed 20,000 crore to India's GDP over the last decade. This is a research or a study which has been carried out, which has indicated that over the last decade, the multiplier effect in the economy by the space sector has been quite significant, where basically it has created close to around 96,000 jobs. 96,000 jobs have been generated. Now, for every dollar produced by the space sector, there has been a multiplier effect of almost 2.5 in other areas of the economy, because the growth of the space sector basically contributes and provides the growth opportunities for multiple smaller allied industries as well. Component manufacturers, startups, all of them, they start coming up, they start growing. So that is why the growth of space sector is quite significant. Now, this was done, or this observation and this study was basically done and released on the occasion of India's Space Day. And India's Space Day was celebrated yesterday, that is 23rd of August, to mark the 1 year for the landing of the Chandrayaan-3 mission. So that is where Space Day, when it is celebrated, why it is celebrated, one needs to keep that in mind. So Space Day is celebrated on 23rd August to celebrate the landing of the Chandrayaan-3 mission on moon. Then, Bangladesh unrest hits engineering exports. So, engineering exports, be it iron and steel or other different types of components, they have been impacted quite significantly due to the unrest in Bangladesh. Now, there has been a decline by almost 9% in the engineering exports which were going out. But then this has not hit the country's overall exports to that extent because of new markets which have come up. India has lost some of its exports, and the amount of exports that it would carry out normally to countries like Italy, Korea, Nepal, Bangladesh, there the exports have declined, there the exports have come down. But simultaneously, UAE and Middle East has emerged as newer destinations where the engineering exports have increased. Now, engineering exports, why they are important? Because not only will they give you enough amount of foreign exchange, they will help you ward off the deficit, trade deficit, etc. But at the same time, engineering goods and engineering products, they again have the same multiplier effect on the economy. For example, iron and steel, if it is exported, will provide the job opportunities in the minerals and the mine sector as well, and multiple small and medium scale industries will also get the opportunity to thrive and to come up. So that is why you need to have this kind of engineering exports to be promoted, where India is doing particularly good in exploring the newer markets. Then, after that, Pacific leaders discuss rising seas, great power rivalries. Now, this basically discussion has taken place in the Pacific Islands Forum. Now, this is a grouping of 18 different countries in the Pacific region who basically they came together in the 1970s, early 1970s itself, to voice their opinion for a combined action, because these are very small countries. Now, this year, this forum actually met in the island of Tonga, in the capital of Tonga. Now, this is the same island which was ravaged a couple of years back by a huge volcanic eruption across Hunga Tonga and Hunga Hapai. Both these peaks erupted quite significantly, and that released or unleashed not only an ash cloud which destroyed the vegetation in the immediate vicinity, but also set off a tsunami. So that is why this country has been reeling under that. So it was a good change that this meeting has happened and is being held there. Now, the main problem that these countries are facing is one of climate change, where not only the climate disasters have increased, but various small countries like Tuvalu, for example, they risk being completely drowned by the rising seawater level in the next 30 years itself. So that is a huge problem. Then after that, what they are more concerned now is, with increased conflict between US and China, these countries are feeling squeezed out. It is in fact in their backyard that this great power game is taking place. Warships, aircraft flyovers, everything is impacting them. Now, this along with the climate change have been the major issues. Now, these countries have also urged countries or the partner nations like Australia to take some action to get rid or to ward off climate change. For example, while Australia champions itself as an advocate against climate change and an advocate for a greener and a better planet, Australia at the same time significantly relies upon the income from mining sector, and the mining sector has got a large amount of carbon footprint that it can generate. So, various different mines being run by Australia, that is responsible again for increased emissions, and these countries are taking a note of that. So, while Australia has expressed its interest to hold the Conference of Parties for Framework on Climate Change, UN Framework on Climate Change, these countries, they want accountability from Australia as well as from US and China to at least come to the peace terms. Now, this Pacific Islands Forum meeting was also something which was attended by the UN Secretary General, adding significant weightage and authenticity to this meeting as well. Okay? Now, after that, coming to the last article, that is Information and Broadcasting Ministry to support the finalists of a global contest. Now, a global contest is being held and is slated to be held in Goa this year, where that contest will be about World Audio, Visual and Entertainment Summit, what is known as WAVES. World Audio, Visual and Entertainment Summit. Now, this is a global competition to foster the improved content creation and the community of content creators, where animation, films, etc. will be tested and will be sought to be made. Now, the ministry has actually announced that the winners of these or the finalists of these, they will be handheld, and they will be handheld through the various different projects, and the ministry will actually promote those projects. So, that can be good for the not only the entertainment industry, but at the same time the technological infusion which is required in the entertainment industry and in the broadcasting industry, that will also come to the fore. So, here there are certain opportunities which lies in front of us in order to utilize. For example, it will lead to expansion of India's content market trade footprint globally. Then it will lead to promotion of India's various different policies for promotion of VFX, post-production and gaming industry as well. Then stimulating industry collaboration for growth revenue with these content creators, production houses will also be pitching in, and then you can have a better output, positioning India as global powerhouse in global media and enterprise landscape. So, these are some of the objectives that India seeks to achieve, because this again is one sector where the demographic dividend can come to the fore. And while the global economy to a certain extent is also being infused by these content creators, infiltrated by these content creators, it will be only opportune for India to utilize and exploit that and make India as a hub for this industry. So, that brings us to the end of the discussion here for the day. I hope the discussion has added some amount of information to your existing knowledge set. If you have liked the content, please don't forget to click on the like, share and the subscribe button. Try providing the suggestions that I have asked for about Indian agriculture in the comment section below. Till we meet again, do take care of yourself. Goodbye. Thank you.